What if the betrayal you uncovered led you to a secret even darker? A secret about your own father, your own marriage, your entire life. Welcome to Cheating Wives Among Us. Today's story has two twists, and neither one is what you think. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything. The letter came on a Thursday, plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from Gross Tate, which is the next town over, the kind of place you go when you want to mail something and not be seen mailing it. My name was typed on the front, not Pastor Fontaine, just Eli Fontaine. Whoever sent it wanted me to know this wasn't church business. I was alone in my office at New Hope Baptist, 6:45 in the morning. I liked the building before anyone else got to it, just me and God and the quiet of an empty sanctuary. The sun was coming through the stained glass, throwing blue and gold across my hands, and I opened the envelope and read it, standing up. I'm not going to recite the whole thing to you, but the gist was this. My wife, Grace, had been sleeping with Judson Thibodeau, my head deacon, the man who rebuilt our fellowship hall, the man whose wife's funeral I preached 4 years back, and it had been going on for about 3 years. They met on Wednesdays. She told me she had a Bible study in Maranguen. There was no Bible study. Now, I could have read all that and thrown it away. People write poison letters. People lie. I've been a pastor 12 years. I know what jealousy and boredom can cook up in a small town. But the letter had one more line. It described a birthmark on my wife's body, inner left thigh, shaped like a crescent moon 3 inches below the hip. And that's specific. That's not gossip. That's inventory. Somebody who'd seen her, or somebody who'd heard from someone who'd seen her, put that in there because they knew it would stop me from throwing the letter away. It stopped me. Now let me tell you about Grace, because you need to understand what I was looking at across the breakfast table that morning. I met her when she was 19 and I was 22. Her daddy was Pastor Walter Broussard, the man who built New Hope Baptist into what it was, the man who took me under his wing when I was still working at my father's shop with grease under my fingernails, and no idea what God wanted from me. Walter saw something in me. He said I had a voice. He said God had plans for me, and Grace was part of the whole thing, the mentor's daughter, home from Southeastern for the summer, yellow sundress at the 4th of July picnic. She looked at me like she was deciding whether I was worth her time, and she decided I was, and I never thought to ask why. We married in that church. Walter officiated. My father, Raymond, stood up as best man, cried at the wedding, only time I ever saw that man cry. 17 years. That's how long I'd been waking up next to her. And that Thursday morning she was making scrambled eggs with green onions and Tabasco, and she smiled at me when I walked in, and she said, "You're up early." And I sat down and ate the eggs, and they were good, and I watched her talk about curtains for the fellowship hall and Josie Thibodeau's behavior problems in Sunday school, and she said Judson's name the same way she said anybody's name, no catch, no color, just a name. I thought, you are sitting here talking about curtains, and somewhere in this town there is a man who knows the same map of your body that I do. You okay? She asked. You're quiet, just thinking. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam the letter on the table and say, explain this. A year ago, a month ago, I would have, because that's what a righteous man does, right? Brings things to light. But something in that letter changed the machinery. Not what I believed, what I was willing to do about it, because here's what I understood sitting at that table. If the letter was true, then I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with a system. 3 years isn't a slip. 3 years is a schedule. And if I went in swinging before I understood the shape of the thing, I'd be the one who looked unhinged, and whoever built this system would have time to take it apart and hide the pieces. So I decided to be patient, and I need you to understand, for a man like me, a man who played linebacker in high school, a man who hit things before he started preaching, patience wasn't calm. Patience was the most aggressive thing I could do. I watched her for 6 days, noted her routines. Grace was meticulous, accounted for every hour like a woman balancing a checkbook. But Wednesdays were different. She left at 10, came back at 3. Bible study in Maringouin. I asked around, casual, sideways. I asked Delaney Harris, who ran the women's study at First Baptist in Maringouin, how the interchurch group was going. She looked at me blank. What group? There was no Wednesday Bible study. There never had been. Wednesday came. I told Grace I had a hospital visit in Baton Rouge. She kissed my cheek. I parked behind an empty house at the end of our street and waited. At 9:47, her white Camry went past me heading east. I gave her 2 minutes and followed. 25 minutes out past Maringouin, cane fields, then a gravel road, then a ranch house with a tin roof and pecan trees, Judson's silver Dodge in the driveway. Grace pulled in beside it, checked her hair in the rear view, got out, walked to the front door, and went inside without knocking. That's the detail that got me, not the house, not the truck, the not knocking. You knock at a friend's house. You don't knock at a place where someone's already waiting, where the door's already unlocked. I sat in my truck behind the tree line for 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. Didn't need to see more. The arrival was enough. I drove to the bayou, the old spot off Parish Road 77 where my daddy used to take me fishing. Sat on the cypress root I'd been sitting on since I was 8. And for the first time in my adult life, I had nothing to say to God. Not because I'd lost faith, because the words I had were too ugly for prayer and too honest for silence, and I didn't know what to do with something that didn't fit in either box. After a while, I called Reese Blanchard. Reese and I go back to T-ball. He went to the Marines, came back, became a sheriff's deputy. He's the only person in Calvary I trust the way you trust a wall you can lean against in the dark. I need to talk to you, I said, not as a deputy, as my friend. He was there in 15 minutes, sat down on the root next to me without a word. I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet a long time. Then, what do you want to do? I want to know everything before I do anything, he nodded, like he was accepting orders. Then that's what we do. I asked Lorraine Picard to pull the church financials. 5 years' worth. Lorraine was our secretary, 15 years at the church, sharp as a box cutter, reading glasses on a chain, could find any document in 2 minutes flat. I told her it was for the annual board report. She looked at me over those glasses. That look said, I know you're only telling me half the story, but I'll do the work because the work matters. 3 days later, the binders were on my desk. I went through them over 2 evenings, and the numbers told a story that made my stomach turn. Judson Thibodeau had been giving about $15,000 a year to New Hope. Solid, steady giving. The man ran a good crawfish farm, and he tithed like he meant it. Then, about 3.5 years ago, it jumped. Not a little. The first year's spike I could explain. Grief and gratitude. The church had carried him through Marianne's illness. People give generously when they feel held. But after that, 68,000, then 91. Then, and we were only 2/3 through the current year. Already over 140, and the money was earmarked. specifically, deliberately earmarked for projects that Grace championed: the women's ministry retreat, the children's wing renovation, a mission trip to Honduras she organized and led. You see what she'd done? Judson sinned and felt guilty. Guilt made him give. Grace pointed the giving toward her own projects. Her standing in the church went up. The more indispensable she looked, the harder she was to expose. Who's going to tear down the woman behind the children's wing? Now, that's clever. I can admire the engineering of a thing even when the thing is rotten. But the money told me something else, too. It told me who else was in on it. I went to see Elder Clyde Arsenault on his front porch. Clyde was 71, retired parish clerk, been on the church board since before I was born, the kind of man who knows where every buried bone in town is because he watched most of them get put in the ground. I sat in the chair he offered and said, "Clyde, Judson's giving has more than tripled in 3 years. All earmarked. Does that concern you?" His hands stopped shelling pecans. Just for a heartbeat. Then they started again, but wrong, pressing too hard, cracking the shells uneven. "A generous heart is nothing to question, Pastor." I let the silence stretch, watched him crack bad pecans. Then I stood up and said, "Thank you, Clyde." I was halfway to my truck when he called after me, "Pastor, sometimes it's best to let blessed things stay blessed." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. That sentence told me everything. Clyde knew, and Clyde had decided the money was worth more than my dignity. I just didn't know yet how he'd found out, or when. That piece came later. 2 days after that, Nate Thibodeau showed up at my office door, Judson's eldest, 18 years old, supposed to be heading to LSU in 6 weeks, supposed to be fishing and saying goodbye to friends and doing careless things. Instead, he was standing in my doorway looking like a boy who hadn't slept since spring. He sat down and tried to come at it sideways, hypotheticals about sin and truth and whether telling something that hurts people can still be the right thing. I let him circle, then he stopped circling. "I wrote that letter, Pastor Eli. I wrote it because you deserve to know." He told me how he found out his father's iPad synced to Judson's phone, a detail Judson either forgot or never understood. 3 months ago, Nate opened the messages and there it was, texts, photos. Not what you're thinking, but private enough. Plans for Wednesdays. "I love you" messages. A reference to a birthmark described in the kind of detail that doesn't leave room for interpretation. He recognized Grace's number. She was the Sunday school coordinator. She'd brought casseroles to their house for 6 months after his mother died. "I confronted my dad," Nate said, and his voice cracked. He denied it, looked me in the eye and denied it. So I showed him the screen, and he just went down. On his knees on the kitchen floor, crying, begging me not to tell anyone. What did he say? He said, "Your mother is gone. Grace is the only good thing I have left." Like that made it right, like Mom being dead gave him permission. Nate swallowed. And then he told me he loves her. He said he's been planning to ask her to leave you. He wants them to be together, out in the open. That was new. The letter hadn't mentioned it. The financial records hadn't suggested it. Judson wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was drafting blueprints for a future that required my life to collapse first. But Nate wasn't finished. He said, "There's something else. In the messages, Dad texted Grace about Elder Clyde coming to his house about 8 months ago. He said Clyde saw Grace's car in his driveway on a Wednesday and came back later and confronted him about it. Dad told Grace that Clyde promised to keep quiet as long as the situation was handled discreetly. Then Dad wrote, he won't talk. He needs the money flowing, same as we need him quiet. So that's how Clyde fit. Not a bystander who'd stumbled onto something and kept it to himself out of misguided loyalty. A man who'd negotiated silence, who'd turned the other way because Judson's checkbook kept the church running, and exposing the affair would have shut the tap off. "Pastor," Nate said, and he was fighting it now, his eyes red, his jaw working, "my mom knew something was wrong before she died. She told my Aunt Vivian, near the end when she was still clear enough to really talk. She said, 'Judson is already gone. Someone else has him.' She died believing that." I sat with that for a moment. "Nate," I said, "when did the affair start? You saw the messages. What did they say?" "The oldest ones I found went back about 3.5 years. But there were references to before that. Dad talking about before we started and when it was just looks and wanting. Mom was still alive during that part. She was in treatment. She was dying. And Dad was already, he couldn't finish. So let me lay it out for you plainly, because Nate couldn't say it, and I'll say it for him. Marianne Thibodeau spent the last months of her life being eaten alive by cancer, and she could feel her husband leaving her. She sensed it the way a woman senses these things, not through evidence, through absence, through the way a man's eyes go somewhere else when he's sitting right next to you. The physical part of the affair may not have started until after she was in the ground, but the emotional part, the wanting, the looking, the turning away from your dying wife toward somebody else, that was already happening while Marianne was still counting her remaining days. She died knowing. That changes things. That changes the entire weight of what Judson did. "You did the right thing," I told Nate. "The letter, coming here, all of it. The only wrong thing would have been letting me live inside a lie. I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I know you didn't." He broke then, not loud, just his shoulders going and his breath catching, the way young men cry when they've been holding it too long. I came around the desk and put my hand on his shoulder and held it there. An 18-year-old boy carrying 3 months of his father's sins, and the man those sins were committed against was the one comforting him. I don't know what that says about the world, but I know it's true. He pulled himself together, almost left. Then he turned back. "Are you going to be okay?" "I'm going to be honest. That's the best I can offer right now." After he was gone, I locked the door. I sat behind my desk and thought about Marianne Thibodeau in her hospital bed, 90 pounds, holding on to her husband's hand while he was already holding on to somebody else in his head. I thought about her telling Vivian, her own sister, "He's already gone," and I stopped praying about it, not because I'd lost God, because I'd found my plan. I need to tell you about the house on Pecan Street now, because this is where the story goes, somewhere I didn't expect. Somewhere nobody expected. My father's house had been empty since he died 8 years ago. Raymond Fontaine, quiet man, ran the only auto shop in Calvary for 35 years, hands like catcher's mitts, died of a heart attack in 2018. I kept the house, paid the taxes, told myself I'd sell it one day. Never could. I'd gone over there during the investigation, poking through his things the way you do when you're stirred up and looking for solid ground. Boxes in the attic, tax returns, old photos, a Folgers can of bolts and screws. I'd set it all aside. This time I went back and went deeper. The closet in the back bedroom, his bedroom, the one he slept in alone for 35 years after my mother left. I was pulling out shoe boxes when I noticed a wall panel that didn't sit right, like it had been moved and moved again until the edges wore smooth. I pried it open. Behind the studs, a gray metal lockbox. Fireproof. Locked, but cheap. A flathead from Daddy's own toolbox popped it on the third try. Inside were letters, dozens, handwritten on lined paper, some in envelopes, some loose, spanning from 1978 to 2015. And I recognized the handwriting because I'd spent 12 years studying it in sermon notes, in margin scribbles, in the careful cursive of the church's earliest records. Walter Broussard, my father-in-law, my mentor, the man who married me and Grace, who shaped my calling, who put me behind that pulpit. The letters were love letters. I'm going to give you one line, just one, because the rest is between the dead and God, and I don't have the right to open that wider than I have to. The first letter, dated March 1978. R. I held your hand, and for a moment the impossible felt like the only true thing in my life. R was Raymond, my father. I sat on that closet floor for 3 hours and read 37 years of a love affair that happened in fragments, stolen afternoons at a fishing camp on False River, a motel in Opelousas, the back office of the church after Wednesday service when everyone else had gone home. Walter wrote about the agony of living double, about marrying Colette as the life the world required, about Raymond marrying my mother, Darlene, who left when I was 7 because she sensed something she couldn't prove. And then this is the one that broke me. I told Grace I thought you and she would make a fine match. If our children build a family together, it means what you and I have wasn't wasted. My father and my father-in-law had been in love for nearly 40 years. And Walter, methodical, visionary, the man who saw 5 years ahead in everything, had positioned me to marry Grace. Not formally, not with a contract, but the mentorship, the grooming, the way he gently angled me toward his daughter until it felt inevitable, that was all architecture. He wanted his beloved's son married to his girl, wanted the two families bound. My whole marriage was a bridge between two men who couldn't be together, and Grace and I had walked across it without ever seeing what was underneath. I sat there surrounded by those letters until it was dark. And everything I thought I knew about my father, about my calling, about why Walter chose me, about why Grace and I ended up together, all of it just fell away, like plaster coming off a wall to show whatever's really behind it. 5 days. That's how long I gave myself to grieve before I started moving. I drove to Baton Rouge and sat across from a family attorney named Margaret Landry, no relation to anyone in Calvary, which is the point. She told me what I needed to hear. Adultery is a fault ground for divorce in Louisiana. It affects spousal support, and if I had documentation, the court would look favorably on me. I had documentation enough to wallpaper her office. I reviewed the church bylaws. New Hope Baptist was an independent congregation. No bishop above us, no denominational hierarchy. The pastor serves at the pleasure of the congregation, not the deacon board. The board could advise, recommend, even call a vote, but they couldn't remove me on their own. If I played this right, Judson and Clyde would lose their positions, and I'd keep mine. I had Lorraine prepare a full financial audit, clean, detailed, the kind of thing you could spread on a table and let speak for itself. She didn't ask why. Lorraine never asked why. She just worked faster when she sensed it mattered, and I wrote a sermon. Title came to me like a stone through a window, When the Shepherds Become Wolves. Sunday morning, day 28. Church was full. Summer Sunday in Calvary. Women in hats, men in decent shoes, children squirming, window units fighting a war they'd been losing since 2006. Grace in the front row, left side, blue dress and pearls. Judson third row with his kids. Clyde in the elders section, hands folded on his Bible. Colette in the back, where she always sat, because the back gives you the best view of everyone and everything. I opened to 2 Samuel 12. Nathan and David, you know the story. Prophet walks into the palace and tells the king a story about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb, and the king is outraged. And Nathan says those 4 words, "You are the man." I preached for 40 minutes about hidden sin, about leaders who think their position makes them exempt, about churches that trade truth for comfort. I didn't name a single name, but my eyes found Judson, and I watched the color leave his face the way water leaves a cracked glass. I found Clyde, and his jaw was working on nothing, chewing air. I found Grace, and there it was, a flicker I'd never seen on her before. Not guilt, fear. At the end, I said, there will be a special board meeting tonight at 6, all elders and deacons required. There are matters of church governance that need immediate attention. Grace caught me in the hallway, grabbed my arm. What was that about? The truth, Grace. That's what church is supposed to be about. She searched my face, and I gave her nothing. 17 years of marriage, and she was used to reading me the way you read weather, the jaw tightness when I was frustrated, the ear rubbing when I was thinking. I'd shut all of that down. She was looking at a closed door. She let go. I heard her heels clicking fast toward the parking lot. She was going to call Judson. Let her. 6 o'clock, Fellowship Hall, fluorescent lights that made everyone look like they hadn't slept in a week. The long table, the folding chairs, a pitcher of water nobody touched. Present, me, Clyde, Judson, and 3 other deacons, Floyd Giori, Pete Hebert, Roy Boudreau, plus Mrs. Thibodeau, the treasurer. No relation to Judson, just one of those Bayou surnames half the parish shares. I opened with prayer, kept it short. Then I opened my folder. I laid out the financial audit. I didn't give a speech about it. I let them read it. Floyd got there first. His eyebrows went up. Pete followed. Roy was slower. Judson didn't look at the papers at all. He was looking at me. I'll make this simple, I said. Over 3 years, one deacon's giving jumped more than 400%. All earmarked for projects my wife championed. And when Elder Arsenault discovered the personal relationship between that deacon and my wife 8 months ago after seeing her car in his driveway, he chose to keep it quiet. I looked at Clyde, because the money was more important than the truth. The room died. Not went quiet, died. Like someone had pulled the plug on it, Clyde tried. Now, Pastor, Brother Judson's generosity, Clyde, how long? His mouth worked. Nothing came. Judson stood up. His chair barked against the floor. Eli, please, sit down, Judson. He sat. Not because I outranked him, because my voice was carrying something he'd never heard from me, and whatever it was made the air heavy enough to push him back into that chair. I laid out the rest. Dates, the Wednesday pattern, the non-existent Bible study, the gravel road. I had copies. I slid them across the table the way you deal cards you know are going to lose somebody the pot. Then Judson broke. Face in his hands, shoulders going. The sound that came out of him wasn't crying. It was deeper than that, more animal. 3 years of holding a door shut, and it had just blown off the hinges. I'm sorry, he said. I was lonely. After Mary Ann, I was so. You were my deacon. I kept my voice low. The quieter I got, the louder it felt. I baptized your children. I held your hand at your wife's funeral, and your wife died knowing you'd already turned toward someone else. Don't sit here and tell me about loneliness. Nobody moved. Here's what happens, I said. Judson resigns as deacon tonight. Clyde resigns as elder tonight. The board convenes a congregational meeting, and the church gets told the truth. Not gossip, the truth. Leadership failed. The congregation deserves to know. Judson said, think about what this does to the church. You should have thought about that before you took my wife to bed every Wednesday for 3 years. Clyde tried. Can we not arrange a quiet? I'm finished with quiet arrangements, Clyde. Quiet arrangements are how we got here. Then Floyd spoke. Floyd Guillory, 63, retired pipefitter, a man who said 10 words per meeting on a good day, and whose 10 words were usually worth more than everyone else's 100. I stand with Pastor Eli, Floyd said. If we can't be honest in the house of God, we don't deserve to lead in it. Pete looked at the papers, looked at Floyd, nodded. Roy rubbed his face like he was trying to erase it, then said, What Floyd said. 3-2. Meeting over. Judson left through the side door without looking back. His truck sprayed gravel getting out of the lot. Clyde shuffled out behind him, moving like a man who'd suddenly gotten old. Floyd stopped beside me, put his hand, big, weathered welder's hand, on my shoulder. That took guts, Pastor. That took 3 weeks in a legal pad, Floyd. He almost smiled. You need anything, call me. I sat in the empty hall and stared at the plastic cups nobody'd touched, and I thought, now the hard part. Grace was at the kitchen table when I got home, sitting in her chair, the one by the window, hands clasped, fingers laced. Judson had called her, of course. I poured a glass of water, stood at the sink, looking out the kitchen window at the backyard, the live oak, the tire swing from when we'd talked about having kids and then didn't, the gardenia bushes she'd planted our first year in this house, all of it just sitting there in the dark, waiting for a family that never showed up. It's not what you think, she said. I followed you, Grace. I sat outside his house. Her face went white in stages. She tried the angles. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. You were never here, Eli. You gave everything to the church and left nothing for me. She worked through each one like she was going down a list she'd prepared, and I answered each one the same way. Not with anger, not with pleading, just with facts laid flat on the table like boards that wouldn't bend. Then she reached for the deepest thing she had. You don't know what it's like growing up in a pastor's house, what my father put my mother through. And I said, I know exactly what your father did. I know things about your father that would make what you've done look minor. She froze, mid-breath. What are you talking about? I let the silence sit. I wasn't ready to use that weapon. Not yet, not here. But I wanted her to feel the shape of it in the room. I've filed for divorce, I said. Papers get served Monday. I need you out of this house by Wednesday. You can stay with your mother. She's been your alibi long enough. She didn't expect that. I could see it. She'd prepared for rage, for tears, maybe for a long, grinding negotiation that ended with forgiveness and counseling, and a pastor and his wife putting on a brave face for the congregation. She had not prepared for a man who'd already been to the lawyer, already done the math, already decided. Please, she said. One word, it hung there. Go to your mother's, Grace. She packed a bag. I heard the sounds of it from the kitchen, drawers, hangers, zipper. She came downstairs carrying the gray suitcase we'd bought together for a trip to Destin we never took. She stopped in the doorway. I did love you, she said. I know. In whatever way that house taught you to love. She left. I listened to the Camry until it was gone. Then I opened the cabinet above the stove and took down a bottle of Maker's Mark that somebody had given me 3 Christmases ago, still sealed, because pastors don't drink where anybody can see. I poured 2 fingers into a juice glass and drank it slow. 1 glass, then I washed it, put it back, and went to bed in a house that was mine now, only mine. I need to tell you about Colette, because the story doesn't end until she's in it. My mother-in-law was 67 years old, and she had run the social machinery of Calvary, Louisiana, for as long as most people could remember. She'd raised a daughter in a parsonage, buried a husband who was a saint to everyone who didn't know better, and maintained a public face so solid you could have mounted a plaque on it. 2 weeks after Grace moved in with her, Colette started working. Quietly. Not publicly. Colette didn't do public. She did whispers. A word here, a word there, dropped like seeds into the ears of women she'd known for 40 years. Eli was cold. Eli was neglectful. What's a woman supposed to do? She was trying to flip the story, make me the cause and Grace the symptom. She was good at it. She'd been managing narratives for 4 decades, but she hadn't counted on Lorraine. Lorraine Picard didn't whisper and didn't campaign. What she did was make the financial records available to anyone who wanted to see them. She organized the audit into a summary a child could read, and when the whispers reached the women's ministry, Lorraine sat in the back of a tense Wednesday meeting and said calmly, "If anyone has questions about the church finances, I have the records. I'd rather we deal in facts." That's all she said. But facts are heavy, and they crushed the whispers flat. 6 weeks after the board meeting, I went to Colette's house. I brought one letter, just one, from the box. I'd chosen carefully, tender enough to be unmistakable, not explicit. Dated 1989, I set it on the kitchen table in front of her. "I found these in my father's house. There are dozens more." She picked it up. Her hands shook. She read it, set it down. And for the first time in my life, I watched Colette Broussard take the mask off. Not a dramatic removal, more like something sliding loose that had been held in place for so long it had left marks. Without it, she looked smaller, older, tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "Since 1982, she said, I found the first one in his desk. I was looking for a stamp." "And you stayed." "I was pregnant with Grace. The church needed a pastor's wife." "Divorce wasn't. You didn't do that. Not here. Not then." I didn't say anything. I let her talk because she needed to talk, and I needed to hear it. She told me she'd lived with the knowledge for 33 years, had taught herself to wall it off, to treat it as Walter's private burden, to run the household and raise the daughter and smile at the congregation and never, not once, let the surface crack. And when Grace started showing the same patterns, the Wednesday absences, the careful alibis, the practiced blankness when her husband's name came up, Colette had recognized it the way you recognize a song you've been humming your whole life. "You could have told her," I said. "You could have broken the pattern. Instead, you covered for her. You answered the phone when she was at Judson's house. You gave her alibis. You taught her that this is what women in your family do. They perform, and they survive, and they never let the truth get loose." What would you have had me do, Eli? Tell the whole town their pastor was in love with the mechanic? "I would have had you tell the truth," she wiped her eyes. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's the right thing, and you knew it, and you chose the other way, for 40 years. She was quiet for a minute, then, "Walter pushed you and Grace together. You know that. He talked about it for years, said Raymond's boy and his girl would make a fine match, said it would complete the circle. I thought he meant the church families, legacy, but he meant them. He wanted the two people he loved most bound together. There it was, spoken out loud. Confirmation that my whole marriage was a design. Two men who couldn't be together building a bridge out of their children instead. I stood up. I'm leaving this letter with you. Do what you want with the rest. I'm done carrying other people's secrets." She called after me at the door. For what it's worth, he did love Raymond. It was the realest thing in his life. I know, I said. That's the part that hurts. The divorce went through in October. Grace didn't fight it. She moved to Baton Rouge, got a job at a nonprofit, stopped going to church altogether. Judson sold the crawfish farm at a loss and moved to Houma. I heard through Reese that he and Grace tried to keep it going for a while, but the thing between them died fast once the secrecy was gone. Turns out the sneaking had been the whole engine. Without it, they were just two people who'd wrecked their lives and didn't have enough left over to build a new one together. Nate went to LSU. The morning he left, I found him in the church parking lot standing by his truck, staring at the building. "You okay?" I asked. "I keep thinking about my mom, about what she'd say." "I think she'd say you did right." He shook my hand, firm, deliberate, a man's grip, and drove off toward Baton Rouge. I watched his taillights until they were gone. The church changed. Some people left, the ones who were there for the comfort, for the social standing, for the inside of something feeling. New people came. Families from neighboring parishes who'd heard about the pastor who cleaned house and told the truth. Floyd ran the deacon board, steady and quiet. The finances went transparent. Every dollar posted monthly, no more closed-door earmarks. My sermons changed too. The old Eli preached from certainty, from the high ground. The new Eli preached from the mess. I talked about doubt, about pain, about faith as a compass, not a fortress. A fortress keeps the weather out. A compass just tells you which way you're pointed when the storm hits. 6 months later, a Sunday in late February, cool enough to feel like borrowed weather. Church was 3/4 full, new faces in some seats, same creaky pews. I preached from Psalm 23, stayed on one verse, "He leads me beside still waters." I talked about how sheep won't drink from rushing water because they're scared of it, and a shepherd has to find the calm spots. Stillness isn't peace as the absence of trouble. It's the shepherd doing the work. After service, I drove out to the bayou, same spot, same route. Sat down, I prayed, not for answers, I had those, just, I'm still here. I don't understand half of what happened, but I'm still here. Walked back to the truck. On the dashboard was a photo of my father, Raymond, standing in front of somebody's Buick at the shop, shop rag in his back pocket, half smiling. I'd kept the photo because whatever else was true about that man, the half smile was real. I tucked it into my Bible, started the engine, and drove home. Lorraine had left a message about the spring revival budget. I called her back, and we talked about practical things. The speaker's fee, new hymnals, whether the parking lot needed restriping. Before she hung up, she said, "You preached a good one today." "Thanks, Lorraine." "I mean it. It was real. Real's about all I've got left," she laughed, short, warm. "That's plenty, Pastor. See you Monday." I went inside, made dinner, ate it at the table in a quiet house.